Well, we thank you for your patience. We are in New York City. We have a new soundboard here, and it took a minute to get it configured. We're still having issues, as it were. Two of my favorite guests today, David Freiheit, also known as Viva Frei. We got a lot to talk about. I kind of feel like if you get sick or leave the country for 2 or 3 days, when you come back, like a whole wheel of history is turned in that 2 or 3 days. Mark Changizi joining us again as well. He's Iranian. He's a physicist. He's a cognitive psychologist. And I'm fascinated to hear what his take on so many of the distortions that are out there. There's his book, Motorcycle Mind, The Secrets Behind the Coolest Invention Ever. I think he's doing a lot of motorcycle riding these days to cool his mind because, again, there's a lot to be upset about, but we're going to start with Viva after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous.
I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that?
I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. And we'll get to our guest just a second. A couple things. Caleb, first of all, you can reduce the volume on my speaker here to about 30, I'd say, because things are a little bit louder now that we're on the air. Fatty 15, numero uno, longevity supplement. I've added 2 more that I have developed. One is NR Boost. The other is Senosync. Let me get you the NR Boost and Senosync. Collectively, you have nicotinamide riboside, PQQ, you have resveratrol for those natural killer cells, and Physten to clear up the zombie cells. I am very excited about these products. I've added to that, it's at V-Shred MD, I've added to that this Burn Evolve, which I take, and since I take it, I'm taking it right now, in fact. I thought it was important that I tell other people about it as well. It's good for blood sugar maintenance.
Burns fat.
Fat burning and appetite management. Susan uses it. Okay. So, Caleb, maybe you could help me here. I'm not sure which guest I'm going to first.
Viva Frei.
Susan and Emily have been running back and forth here because we are a little bit late.
I think Viva's ready.
Is Viva ready to go?
Viva's ready.
All right, let's do it. Viva Frei, everybody. Sorry about the delay, and you've been very patient. Thank you, my friend. How are you?
Don't worry, I'm very good. How you doing?
I'm good. So as usual, like I said, the historical wheel turns at a rate that I find just astonishing. And now here we are again, probably it's like 5 weeks or something since we last talked, and I feel like I'm in an entirely different world. Yes?
It's incredible. I mean, it's like we've moved off of the Minnesota political assassinations because now the world is fixated on the potential for World War III with Iran. It's impossible to keep up with everything and to know what's going on in all of these fields. But yes, Drew, between Friday and today, it is a world of difference.
Yeah, I mean, we had demonstrations over the weekend. We started the weekend with violent demonstrations. We ended the weekend with peaceful demonstrations. We had a military parade. We had assassinations in Minnesota, and then we have Israel assassinating people in Iran, and then all of a sudden, our military is moving in that direction. Viva, this is one of the reasons I want to talk to Mark today. I'm at the point now where I know that I can't trust anything that's in the media. Susan is messing with my camera, so nobody get too vertiginous here. But I can't trust the media. But now I feel like I don't know who the good guys, who the bad guys are anymore. I don't know anything. I just don't know anything.
With the prospect of America getting involved in the war with Iran and what Israel's doing there, it's a crazy thing. People want to draw lessons from past conflicts. They want to draw lessons from past events that teach them certain lessons. And we have conflicting lessons right now. You have the Chamberlain, you can't negotiate with Hitler lesson from World War II. And then you have the weapons of mass destruction lie. You have the war in Afghanistan, war in Iraq, regime change in Libya, regime change in Syria, teaching us that regime change doesn't work. And then
not only that, but listen, we had a No King's Day, and yet today I saw on X a king was stepping in and going, "I'll be with you soon. We're going to have a king of Iran back." So immediately following No Kings, all of a sudden the king is back in the center of the conversation.
When you have No King's Day from the likes of Bernie Sanders, who rationalizes his 3 homes to Lex Friedman, you have the No King's Day with Randy Weingarten, who makes $560,000 a year, fighting for the lowly employees who are used and abused and exploited. You have the No Kings, and you have Karen Bass deploying the LAPD on so-called peaceful riots. Karen Bass, who makes over $300,000 a year, but there's no water in the fire hydrants. I mean, it's no kings, and yet the socialist preachers live like kings. But no, look, with what's going on in Israel and Iran, you have to amalgamate the information as best you can, and then just take a guess. It's like flipping a coin or throwing a dart. Is Iran now, despite the last 20 years of warning that they're on the eve of a nuclear weapon, is it true now? Yeah. My takeaway is abandon the argument that they're close to a nuclear weapon. Just admit what you want to do, and that's cripple them militarily, and don't cloak it in a rationale that has been 20 years in the making and in 20 years being debunked. Don't pretend.
I think it's pretty clear. At least our president has moved from "I want to cripple the nuclear operation" to "I want a regime change," and that is a very it's not an easy thing to pull off. I mean, you have people fighting for their lives in that case. And by the way, I was just going to show you. I'm reading this book right now, which really interestingly chronicles World War II and part of World War I. Kind of in real time going forward. And we tend to look at history through the prism of certitude because we know how it turned out. When somebody does the good work of writing it as it happened, you realize they were just as clueless as we are right now. But they seem to have a sense that they had no choice. I kind of feel like we have choices here. Am I wrong?
Well, you have choices. You have not do nothing, but do more of the same, or you have the choice of regime change. And they might be two bad choices.
There's a lot in between. There's a lot in between those two choices. A lot.
Negotiate. There's do nothing or continue negotiations, continue doing what we're doing, or regime change, and everything in the middle. But the bottom line is, politicians and the government doesn't. Their rationale is hurry up and do something, even if that thing is wrong, because it's better to do something wrong than to sit on your hands.
You know what? It's interesting to me because as you were saying that, I thought, no, we have another option, which is to just let Israel do its thing and we stay out of it. And then I thought, well, we would supply them with goods and arms and stuff like that. And that is exactly what Roosevelt did. That resulted in if history is able to give us any lessons, it will be that we will get attacked. That's what the lesson was in World War II, was that Roosevelt gave planes to France and to Germany, and Japan attacked us. And we kind of knew it was coming, and we provisioned everybody, and we still got attacked.
I mean, just compare it to the more recent example of what happened in Ukraine, where we haven't gotten attacked. I say we as in America, but had the world said, let Ukraine figure it out with Russia, it would have been over 3 years ago and hundreds of thousands of people ago. These relationships and these conflicts get complicated, they get falsified, and they get exacerbated when you have bigger players propping up the smaller players, and then nobody's really negotiating with their own dollars or fighting with their own.
And by the way, to your point, what's going on if you look at the battlefields in Ukraine, it's World War II. It's the French border is kind of battles going on. I mean, these are crazy, huge military actions, millions of people getting killed, and we're pretending it's just some sort of border skirmish.
It's hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainians have gotten killed now in what will probably resolve itself the way it ought to have been negotiated from the get-go, except hundreds of thousands of people later. With the conflict in the Middle East, people let Israel do its thing, but they're doing their thing with arms procured from America, which implicates America. But arguably, had Israel just been allowed to do its thing decades ago, who knows what that would have resolved like, and it might not have made anybody happy, but what you have here are players falsifying the negotiation relationships in the Middle East for its own interests.
Right.
It never worked out in the past. It's never been done over the table, above board, and it's never been done on proper or accurate information. And then the question is right now, Iran's on the verge of a nuclear weapon, again, as it has been for the last 20 years. What intel is good, what not good, and have we learned anything from the WMD lie that got us into a 20-year war that did nothing?
Right. It's another chapter of history. So let's talk about the President of the United States. He's so focused on winning, he's so much certitude, it seems like, I don't know if that's true or not, but is he the wrong guy for this job? Is he the right guy for this job? Is he making things worse for us? I don't know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are anymore. I'm confused, but you tell me what you think.
I made a joke like it's like mom and dad are fighting now because you have people who you like and respect fighting with each other or vehemently disagreeing on the internet, and they're both right, they're both wrong. The issue is this: I've said, you elected a Trump. People voted for Trump because they trust his judgment, and so the argument is rely on his judgment now. That's true. But they also voted for him because of certain promises that he made, one of which was to not get into more foreign wars in the Middle East, no more new. And it's not a question of judgment. It's a question of trusting and relying on his promises that he made. Now the argument's going to be months into the presidency, things have changed. We got new information. What Tulsi Gabbard said 3 months ago is no longer accurate. Things have changed. We got to reassess. That will always be true. But the question is this: the populist movement that voted for Trump on the basis of no new foreign wars and get the hell out of Ukraine. Not only are we not out of Ukraine yet, getting involved in another war. These are big promises to have to renegotiate on once you're in office. And when you lose I won't say lose the support, but when you gain the ire or the criticism of the Owen Schroyers of the world, of the Alex Joneses, who are arguably why Trump got elected in the first place in 2016, look, you're threading a needle with a camel. I don't know what the expression is, but you're walking a very tough line to walk. If you're backtracking now on all the promises, there better be damn good information above and beyond intel. The AEIE or whatever it is, the Atomic Energy Agency, now says they're really close now. And so we should trust them because we had reports back in 2001 that said Iraq had WMDs, and that turned out to be not just wrong, but lies.
Right, that's right. And let's switch for a second. And again, I'm lost, so admittedly. Let's go to these assassinations over the weekend. I'm hearing once again, because I'm lost, layers and layers of conspiracy theory on this guy, including that he's not the guy that did it, including that he is a far right, he's a far left, he's a Waltz employee. Who is this guy? What did he do? And we have a roommate that maybe wasn't his roommate chatting with the press. What is going on here?
Drew, I'm deep in the weeds on this one. It's not, I'm not doing the investigative journalism, although I'm trying, I'm reaching out to get info, but I've been surfing the internet all weekend. The man's name is Vance Boelter, Boelter. The argument is that he's a far right-wing extremist because he's was a registered Republican. In the early 2000s, I think as of 2004. In 2016, he was appointed by whoever was the governor of Minnesota, it was a Democrat, to some workforce governance board that Tim Walz renewed his appointment to for a period of 4 years. So he is a Tim Walz appointee to a workforce governance board that is being described as bipartisan. I went to the website that describes that governance board. It's on the Minnesota legislature website. It has plans of like racial equity in employment and training, handicapped equity in employment and training. So they're trying to portray this guy as a far right wing guy because he was a registered Republican in 2000, that he's a Christian nationalist because he goes to the Democratic Republic of Congo to give sermons at churches. Let's just say we're not quite sure who he is. There's one element of very, very either damning info or astronomically insane coincidence. A woman by the name of Jennifer Boelter, who's his wife. There's a woman named Jennifer Boelter who interned for Tim Walz in 2010. I was quoted in a Guardian article today as refusing to accept the fact that that's a different Jennifer Boelter because a Tim Walz spokesperson said it's a different Jennifer Boelter who interned for Tim Walz back in 2010. And I'm like, if it is, I want to just tell me. I want to know what it is above and beyond the Tim Walz spokesperson saying it's a different Jennifer Boelter. So sets that aside because it may or may not be a connection, although I think it is, but we'll see. This guy was an appointment of Tim Walz. He went out and murdered the only Democrat lawmaker who voted with Republicans for a budget compromise that included defunding illegal alien programs in Minnesota. The other individual that he shot, Hoffman, coincidence enough, was on the workforce governance board that this guy was appointed to by Tim Walz in 2019. So whether he's left or right, he's clearly a nutbag. Assuming he did it, then you're going to have everybody on the internet who always says, oh, the guy in the picture looks 50 pounds lighter than the one that they got surveillance from.
He sure looks different. Look at the pictures up there, Viva. Look at him. Put him up, Caleb, again. The bald guy and then the guy with the crew cut. There's the mugshot. And then here he is in the ring camera or whatever. Oh, no, there he is. There's the 50 pounds heavier. Now, maybe he lost some weight, to be fair. We don't know when that picture is from, but the picture on the patio before he shot people, that's the one that I find, unless he's wearing a mask. Or, I mean, like really
Yeah, he's wearing a mask.
Look at that.
That's a rubber mask.
It's a rubber mask? I heard he was wearing
mask,
not a rubber mask, but some sort of tights over his head. Or a rubber mask, Susan says. Okay. All right, well, that looks like a rubber mask.
Latex mask. The thing about this is, bear in mind, that's going to add into his head. So by comparison, it'll make his body look a little leaner. It's on a ring. He doesn't look particularly, massive in that mugshot. But then the issue is he's allegedly married. He's married to this person named Jennifer Boelter. Whether or not it's the same one who interned with Tim Walz, show me evidence it's a different woman and I will gladly put that on blast. He's got 5 kids, and apparently he lives in this property with 2 other men roommates. One of whom says, we never discussed politics, but he was a Trump supporter and told me that he voted for Trump with no other information or evidence other than that.
This guy is the so-called roommate. Yeah.
Wearing a Papa John's shirt and, reading a text message off his phone. You guys knew nothing about this, but I can't show it to the journalists, and I'm not reading it again because it takes too long. So nothing about this makes sense, but I don't know how fast Caleb can pull up a tweet where I pulled a video from Tim Walz, which has gone viral now, of a couple weeks ago saying, Democrats, we need to get meaner and we need to get nastier. And then this type of violence happens. So despite all of the hyperbolic, inflammatory, violence-inducing rhetoric from the Democrats, they try to come out after an attack like this in a state like Minnesota of a guy who was a Walz appointee and say it's a far-right extremist. The Republicans and the conservatives are the violent ones here. I don't believe it for a second. But the bottom line is none of this story makes any sense. There was discussion of a manifesto, and now the authorities are saying there was no manifesto. There were just hundreds of pages of writings and lists and hit lists and whatever, which sounds like a manifesto, which they haven't released yet. And whenever they don't release a manifesto, typically it's because what's in that manifesto doesn't toe the line that they want to toe in terms of narrative. It's under the Minnesota state control for now. The feds have placed some charges. So it's a cluster F of a situation, and one does not know what.
Yes.
I know what I think.
Again, back to I don't know what's here it is. Here's the video.
Yeah, look at this.
We can't hear it. Can we? There we are. Yeah, I can't hear it.
They might have muted the audio.
Anyway, I'll take Viva's word for it that that's what he's saying. He's saying get meaner, get nastier, get more violent. And I don't understand that. Any leader saying that, to me, seems like they're inciting trouble. But do we know, was he with his family recently, this guy? I mean, or has he been estranged from his family? Because it all smacks of mental health stuff, right? All the rantings on the writings and then the violence. It just smacks of it.
We don't know about that, but then also I almost forgot to mention this mild detail. His wife was pulled over by the cops for a perimeter check in the area, and she was in the car with other family members, and they had cash, ammo, and passports. I mean, it's...
And the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to... The governor's being mean, and the governor's speaking out on that. Well, maybe it's time for us to be a little meaner. Maybe it's time for us to be a little more fierce.
It was the appointment, and it's the same Vance Boelter. The guy was posted on LinkedIn that his update was looking for work because apparently his NGO got defunded. It's a whole bizarre thing. Like, what the heck is this guy even doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo? It's not anybody who goes out there to do work with the government of the DRC, and then he's flying back to DC. There are layers to this onion, and I think we've only peeled past the brown, dry skin, and we're going to get to the juicy flesh of the onion in the days to come if there's transparency in this. But I appreciate now they're preparing the prosecution, so they're going to be more tight-lipped.
Well, Caleb, Viva, I'm sort of at once enticed by and disgusted by your description of how we're going to proceed to get to the juicy center of this human being. But so be it. He deserves our ire, that's for sure, no matter what was motivating him. Listen, you've been very kind with your time. You were so patient with us, but I'm going to wrap this up a little bit early, and people should be following Viva on X, the Viva Frei, F-R-E-I, vivafrei.com, Rumble, Viva Frei, where else? vivabarneslocals.com. Tell me where else. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But if you Google Viva Frei, you'll get all the articles and all the fun stuff where I get mentioned and mischaracterized as a far-right influencer. Such a terrible insult. Is that what you are? You're a far-right influencer? What's that thing?
Thank him for all the raids.
The what? The
Raids.
Oh yes, you've been delivering Rumble raids to our show, and we really appreciate that. Those have been very...
Like your people.
Yeah, your people are our people. Evidently, I must be a right-wing extremist too, because that's what you are.
Well, I'm just going to say, from a very selfish perspective, I'm glad you had the tech issue, and no one can blame me, because whenever I have a tech issue, everyone's like, Viva's... So anyways, no problem waiting, and it's good.
You know what? I know what you're saying. And listen, the greatest moment of my life, well, one of the most interesting moments of my life is I sat in for Larry King a couple of times. I got to actually host the Larry King show while he was on vacation. And the first time I was scared shitless. And we started going, they just hammered into me how it was, the satellite feeds had to be exactly to the second. And I had 4 satellite feeds from all over the world. I was talking to people from all over the place, each with a different delay, and the delays were separate from the video delays. The audio delays and the video delays were different. And all of a sudden, the stage manager jumps into the stage and goes, "We're off the air." The entire CNN satellite system failed. Never in history has this happened. And I thought to myself, well, the absolutely worst thing just happened, and it had nothing to do with me. So, Viva, I know how you're feeling. So there it is. And I was much calmer after that.
Yep, it happens. It's technology. It's great when it works, but sometimes it just doesn't.
Tell me just really quick before I let you go, what are you guys going to be focusing on, Viva Barnes?
Okay, so Iran thing, Barnes he's got a bunch of great takes on it. He replied to a JD Vance tweet, and Barnes's insight are amazing. Supreme Court decisions are coming down this week to be expected of the nationwide injunctions. The SCOTUS is expected to rule on that. And it's an amazing thing. Like, there's too much to catch up on, but Sunday night we do our best to come.
Yeah, and so next time I talk to you, it'll be yet another new world we will be entering. So thank you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Pleasure. See you soon.
Cheers. Mark Changizi up next. The book is, put it up there, Caleb. You can follow Mark on X at Mark Changizi, Changizi. Motorcycle Mind is the book. There it is. Amazon, of course, where you can get it. Let's see what else. He's got another, I'll have to find out what this is. I'm not sure what that is. But I follow Mark on X. I think that's where I really got exposed to his stuff and have had the great privilege of speaking to him a couple of times. And I got a million questions. So, Mark Changizi after this. What's so special about Paleo Valley's grass-fed and finished bone broth and superfood bars? Well, everything. All are delicious, high in nutrients, low in calories, and contain nothing artificial. Co-founder Autumn Smith on what goes into every superfood bar.
So we have bone broth protein powder, and then we've added other superfoods, cashew butter, we have spirulina in there, acerola, broccoli powder, kale, blueberries. And so it really is kind of just an infusion of superfoods with every bite.
And then there's the extraordinary bone broth protein made with an ancestral approach that boosts our collagen intake.
Collagen is something that's gone by the wayside in our modern diet because we don't eat nose to tail anymore, but it was something we ate a lot of, and it has so many benefits. So if you have sagging skin, joint pain, gut issues, your decreased bone mineral density, slow to heal your wounds, slow recovery, these are all things that collagen can dramatically improve. If we're not giving our body the building blocks to produce it, we just age more rapidly. It also improves sleep, improves blood sugar control. So it's essentially like the Swiss Army knife of healthy aging.
Like I said, Paleo Valley's bone broth is something special. Make Paleo Valley part of your longevity regimen. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 20% off when you subscribe and 15% off your first order. That is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley. The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and that's why they're constantly innovating to deliver the products and services to help you be rationally ready. Be sure to have the medical kit for kids on hand, whether you're a parent or grandparent. It treats 20 childhood conditions, including nausea and vomiting, allergies, asthma, inflammatory illnesses, even bioterror, God forbid. Listen, croup, ear infections, lice, it's all available in the pediatric emergency kit. You can also order the kids kit with an EpiPen should your child be at risk of anaphylaxis. And those EpiPens are carefully sourced and well priced relative to other EpiPens in the market. All 7 kits, each customized for a different purpose, come with a telemedicine consultation and a guidebook. Skip the scramble to an urgent care waiting room full of sick people and expense, or a pharmacy where there's no guarantee they'll have what you need. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off any medical emergency kit, or the supplements for that matter. That again is drdrew.com/TWC.
So I've traveled with my hyaluronic acid serum for my face, which I use every day. And we also brought along the active skin repair. Thank goodness, because I wounded myself. I'll show you the wound as we go. I don't want to pull the dressing up just yet. But the hypochlorous acid in this was used. I used it as an antibacterial. It's been proven as an antimicrobial. And the thing is healing beautifully, like better than ever. Like, it feels great. Here's a picture of what it looked like before I put the dressing on. I was delighted by the effects of the active skin repair. Hypochlorous acid is antimicrobial. It's been clinically proven, and this thing is healing well without difficulty. If you'd like some, go to drdrew.com/skin repair. I'm now free to enjoy my trip, not worry about infection, not worry about bleeding all over the place. This has been working beautifully, and I can get on and keep traveling.
That's brilliant, and thank you, Drew. Where's Dr. Drew? Where is he? Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew.
But I didn't use anything else on my wound except that hypochlorous acid, the active skin repair. That was the great experience, interesting experience with that product, as well as with our granddaughters using it. The link I was curious about is called freex.group, where you can get Mark's first book, Expressly Human, at a discount, and it's signed, I believe, if I'm getting that right. Otherwise, follow Mark on X, Mark Changizi, and then go get the book, Motorcycle Mind. Mark, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
No, it's great to be here.
So listen, I'm having a cognitive crisis of some type where, since we've last spoken, I have learned clearly that virtually everything on the media is some version of bullshit, and it's hard to find out, to try to ascertain what's real, what isn't, but I've accepted that I can trust none of it. But now I've started thinking, I can't even tell who the good guys and who the bad guys are anymore, which is kind of a cognitive construct in and of itself. But I'm struggling with who to support, who to take issue with. At times of real uncertainty, it gets very confusing. Now, is that a cognitive distortion on my part, or is that the nature of confusing times?
Well, this is actually something that comes up in my book before last was Expressly Human, and this is on the origins of emotional expressions, but it's also the origins of free speech itself and the function of expression. And so this is really a problem not with your own mind, but with communities and groupthink and trying to understand what groupthink means. And that was one of the greatest experiences that we had and morals that we had during COVID, was watching in real time what typically we attribute to happening in Nazi Germany or in Islamic Republic of Iran during the revolution, or Cultural Revolution in China. That those kinds of extreme groupthinks, when they happen to those weird people, not us Westerners, right? But what happens at the group level is much more severe than when you come up with justifications after the fact for why you stole the cookies, let's say. You can come up with some kinds of justifications, but when communities come up with justifications, they're incredibly stronger because they're undergoing an evolutionary process over time, so for example, in March and April of 2020, no one wore masks. Don't wear a mask was what they told you. But pretty soon, if you wanted to show that you were a really good person in the COVID cult, you wore a mask. You wore a mask in the car. It was a membership signal. And that membership signal works as a membership signal because it's a pretty freaking ridiculous thing to do. All right. But things like that don't remain membership signals. They get justified in the community over time because certain smart people come up with justifications, and the good justifications spread. And then more and more justifications will spread, and those people receive more and more reputation. They become more revered within the community and are rewarded by it. So within 2 months, there was 100, observational studies that showed beyond a doubt, well, I mean, these were not RCTs, they were all crappy studies, but they were very good studies in the sense that they were convincing to minds, right? They were really convincing to people's minds that masks worked. And it's that kind of level of selecting at the group level. It's selecting for really good arguments as far as minds are concerned, and they're good arguments in the sense that they motivate you to spread that information to somebody else. And so you'll end up with suites of post hoc justifications for things that your sociopolitical community believes for no good reason at all. And those arguments will be really good arguments in the sense that they really do appear to be backed up. And one of the interesting things about COVID is that we watch this happen in real time, and the crazy happen in real time. And then you start to wonder, well, how much of the other stuff that we've learned about all the times in history were in fact shaped by these kinds of sociopolitical physics that creates and bubbles up these justifications for these things that aren't based on actual fact. They're just selected for because they really work on minds over time. And so that's the kind of things that we talk about in Expressly Human, and in trying to understand how the decentralized currency of reputation, which is kind of like Bitcoin, and how the way it has to work has a lot of properties like Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, so let me tell you that the similarity between Bitcoin is a decentralized currency. There's no ledger in a bank that says how much Bitcoin I have and how much Bitcoin you have. And so if I suddenly give Drew Bitcoin, it's not just recorded someplace. It's distributed throughout the network. And the same thing is true for reputation. If I say really douchebaggy stuff to you in an argument and I lose, then there's no central reputation bank that says Mark said something really stupid and now we should, no, it's decentralized across the community. And it ends up with similar kinds of phenomena that we find in Bitcoin. Once you've built this blockchain, which records the history of who gave what Bitcoin to who, it's almost impossible to overturn that history. I mean, and hopefully it's usually true for Bitcoin, but for sociopolitical communities, they can create narratives, which are kind of like these blockchains over time, which are false. And once they're false, they remain believed by everybody practically forever. And they're unbreakable in the same mathematical ways as they're unbreakable for blockchain. So it's trying to understand much of what we believe is based on these sorts of dynamics, not based on a bunch of scientists, aspiring to the truth and putting forth hypotheses and testing them in the hypothetical deductive method. That's not, in fact, what drives most of what we believe. So this is, which is in some sense, going towards explaining why at least your eyes are open that you shouldn't necessarily believe the narratives that are floating around you, especially the one in the community that you're sitting in.
And yet you were telling me a story that makes me, I don't know, sad is maybe too strong a word, but if that's how we are and it's unbreakable, you've also taught me a law that it just rings in my head constantly. It's one of the sources of my confusion, which is that social evil is always done in the name of good. And so you better be very clear about good because you may well perpetrate a social evil in the name of said good if you're not careful. And God knows, reporting your neighbors for barbecues and not wearing a mask, those people would be the prison guards in 1930. But that notion of evil in the name of good, and then the blockchain so-called narratives being unbreakable, what do we do with this? How do you address it?
Well, I mean, these things come up a lot in my YouTube series and also come up in the book. I mean, the only solution we really have is free expression, because over time, all that we can hope for is that there's communication across these socio-political networks. Hopefully there's more than one bubble, and those bubbles have some degree of currency that they care about the other person's currency. Because one problem with these communities is that your currency means nothing to me. So if I go and have an actual argument with you and actually win, then I get a big share of your currency that no one in my community cares about because it has no cachet in my community. So this is like, a bunch of rabbits and there's a bunch of dogs, and I've got, I only want to do stuff for carrots, but the dogs don't have any carrots to give me. And so you can't communicate unless you start to having something that you can trade so they can at least set an exchange rate. In some cases, there's just no exchange rate because no one's interested. There's no volume of transactions going back and forth. So you need to have free expression, and you need to also, in yourself and everybody around you, you need to push the idea of tolerance for the views that you don't like. And with tolerance comes a willingness to potentially engage with them. And that engagement can be motivated from your point of view in humiliating them. That's fine. Humiliation isn't cancellation. Humiliation is the natural byproduct of you winning an argument and wanting to win the argument so that you can win their reputation. And their reputation matters because it raises you up in your own community.
Yeah, I get that, and yet I look at I've been wildly studying history, trying to figure out our present moment, and when I look at history and I look at these unbreakable blockchain narratives, let's call them, they usually don't stop without some real serious implosion or violence, whether it's the Reign of Terror and Napoleon, or whether it's Nuremberg trials, or something real firm has to step in. I know you're advocating for tolerance and speech, and kind of that's the way it works in the scientific community, really, when you get right down to it. Is it naive to think that it'll work with the rest of us, or you have good faith that that's how it will? As long as we have free speech, we have the solution.
Well, I mean, it requires a kind of cultural maturity that has changed over time. The way that the bare bit of respect we have for free expression now is tremendous compared to what it was 100 years ago, and is actually relatively strong compared to almost anywhere else in the world. And this kind of tolerance for viewpoints that you disagree with, I think it can evolutionarily continue to progress, and it just takes constant education in this regard. These sorts of liberal, this is one of dozens and dozens of classical liberal sorts of ideals that are hard to learn. They go against our nature. So I have no reason to think that this is not something that we're all getting better at over time, and that we'll always have trouble with it. But I think every generation it has to be beat into them. And it's potentially the case that maybe we can come up with mechanisms that make this easier. Personally, the mechanism that I've always lived with that helps me is that even as a scientist, I was aloof. I actually argued. I gave all of these sorts of arguments to my students. I'm a scientist, but I move from field to field. I'm a theorist. I can't just stay in one field. I'm not an experimentalist who comes up with clever controls. And I do grand unifying theories, and then I move to another field. And I've been in sort of more than 12 fields, and I have sort of big grand unifying theories. I'm never going to discover anything else in those fields. And I knew that if I showed up to conferences and started to be there and become the big wig at these small conferences, I'm never going to want to leave. You love that. The young guys are like, oh, there's Dr. Changizi. He's so cool and base, because you have a little bit of gray and they think you're cool. And then the girls are batting their eyes and everybody thinks you're that stuff humans love, but all it does is make you only value the questions that community values. And you think that all of the other communities questions and issues are ridiculously stupid. So I've always remained aloof socially because I knew it helped me as a scientist. And I think, for all that I know, it helped me remain aloof during COVID because I am just as social and susceptible to groupthink as everybody else. It's just that I think I'm a little bit more aware of how susceptible that I am, that I have tried to remain aloof, both politically and scientifically. And that's one reason potentially that I was able to see, to see it as a mass hysteria as it in fact was.
Yeah, a massive collective psychosis of sorts. But I do want to ask your opinion. You are of Iranian descent. I want to get your opinion, objective opinion about what's going on there. Because again, I don't seem to have the frame of reference to make a good assessment or good call it the way, in a way that I have judgment to do so. It would be very arbitrary in terms of from me saying, I think this is the right thing to do. Just have a quick question before we get to that. Hold on. You said I knew you did physics and then you did psychology. You've been more fields than just that? Or when you say you've been in a dozen fields, are those fields within these two big disciplines?
Well, within the cognitive and evolutionary and biological and sort of cultural sciences, I've worked on 16 very different kinds of subfields. And I'm a physics mathematician. I have some papers in math, but most of my papers are in sort of applied to biology and evolution and cultural evolution.
I got it. Okay. All right. And thus, again, people need to listen to Mark carefully when he talks, because he's framing this as an evolutionary process, both culturally and I think loosely biological, because that follows. But let's talk about Iran, if you don't mind. And I'm just curious on your thoughts. I don't know if Trump is the right guy for this job. I don't know if Israel's run amok. I don't know if we should be anywhere near any of this. I just am very confused. I did see the former king of Iran, step in and said, I'll be with you soon, which I found ironic on the heels of a no king day, but now a king's going to solve the problems. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on all this.
Well, look, setting aside what to do, it's unambiguous. The vast majority of Iranians is ecstatic to see the mullahs being pummeled. They want to see the mullahs taken out. So this is not some situation where people should doubt that they're like, oh no, now the Iranians are against Israel and the United States. And no, what you see on the streets of waving their
what's
fists.
the percentage? Yeah, we see all that. We see the death to America stuff. But is it? I understand everyone here very much would like to see the mullahs fall. But in Iran, is it 20%, 50%, 80%? I know they have to stay very quiet, so it must be a hard thing to assess.
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you actual numbers, but my family's in Iran and my wife's family's in Iran, and hundreds of other folks that I follow that are Iranians. The vast majority, I would say, between 70 to 90%. And all that it takes in a country is 10% of organized, righteously cult-like figures that keep people in check. And these people are organized, and they in a totalitarian way enforce the Islamic rules bottom up on the streets, and they snitch on their neighbors. And they've hung thousands of people just in the last few years. So people are afraid. People are still afraid. They still haven't lost control of the streets yet. But no question, the vast majority are happy to see the pummeling. So what the right thing to do is, I think the right thing from my point of view is it's not the job of Israel to do a regime change. It's their job to finish the war. And Iran, the mullahs are now finding out, and it's their job is to defang, and they've already really accomplished most of that in the first two days. But they're going to fully defang them, and the hope is that the Iranians on their own find the folks on the ground, and a lot of these folks have been. I presume there's some of these Iranian leaders were killed on the ground with machine gun fire, apparently. So there's a lot of networks of Iranians on the ground, and with, I'm sure, relationships with people in the military, with leadership capabilities that have just kept their mouths shut, because if they opened it, they'd be dead. And the hope is that between that and a temporary king, the Shah, showing up for a very short period of time, just in transition, the hope would be that there could be democracy there. But again, that's not the aim. That's not the justification. And one of the weird things watching this was that because it could be the case that there's a cherry on top, that the Iranians are liberated, It could be the case. That's not the justification. But the mere fact that that could be an outcome, 10%, 90% chance, who knows, seemed to be enough to push people over the edge and say, well, we shouldn't be doing this because that means this is all about liberating the Iranian people. And we know that that kind of regime change, that's not what this is about. This is a war that the mullahs started on 10/7, and setting aside the other decades of there being an enemy of the West, this started on 10/7. They fucked around. They used their proxies to start a war, which they purposely started via a genocide, and then they proceeded to, missiles from all sides and all their proxies, and then proceeded to send nearly 1,000 ballistic missiles. This is a war that they are already in, and Israel's finishing the job. It would be great if the Iranians end up liberated and rise up and make that happen. But the mere fact that that could happen doesn't make this suddenly immoral. Right? That's a potentially extra thing, but it's not the motivation. It's not the justification.
Yeah, I want to just point out too. You mentioned having a Shah come in for a brief period of time. I want to remind people that although Machiavelli has a bad rap, his piece, The Prince, was not because he thought the prince was the best form of government. He thought it was a necessary evolutionary stage in government when things are unstable. And then ultimately the prince stabilizes things, and then you usher in a republic. That was actually his construct. It's just the prince became famous because it's sort of extraordinary, and he wrote it for, if I remember right, Cesare Borgia. He sort of, that's who it was designed for, to sort of glorify a prince that he was, I think, getting money from at the time. But his notion was the function of a strong prince was to stabilize an unstable situation so that you could evolve, speaking of evolve to a republic.
Interesting, yeah. And I certainly don't think that the Iranians want anything more than just a temporary figurehead, and they do mostly rally around him.
Interesting. Are you up for making any predictions? Because you've already shifted my thinking a little bit. Because again, you come from a place of knowledge, and I just have a complete black box to me. And I want to tell you, I was telling Viva that I've learned now I do not trust media. I do not trust anything. I can't. I'm just completely like I'm standing back and assessing at all times, and skeptical of everything I see and hear. That's the world we live in now. But it's okay. But I do feel like you come from a place of knowledge and connection to the reality of on the ground there. Do you have any predictions?
No, I know enough about how these things go and how difficult it is. That 10% to 30%. We don't know the exact numbers. This is, I call it the $1 trillion question of society. Very small numbers of people can keep totalitarianism going forever. It's even though 90%. Are not part of it. They're not organized. And so it can be a bottom-up control. And that's what totalitarianism is. People often think that totalitarianism is authoritarianism so controlled that they can top-down control everything. No, that's not what the totalitarianism is. Decentralized authoritarianism, and it's done by sufficient numbers of people on the street. And those sufficient numbers can be actually fairly small. It's all it takes because they're organized and they're dangerous, and the others are afraid.
I'm going to reframe my question a little bit just because I'm curious about these things. Is Trump the right guy for this job?
I think so. I think that he's been unambiguous in terms of the main thrust, which is that they really can't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And I think that in this case, he's just using that as one excuse. And I agree with Viva Frei. Ultimately, that's not the justification here either. The justification isn't nuclear weapons. It's, of course, colors the situation. The justification is Iran, the mullahs started a war, and Israel is finishing it.
Mark, I appreciate your patience and your time, and you're sharing your thoughts with us here. Tell us about the book before I let you go, Motorcycle Mind.
Yeah, Motorcycle Mind, it comes on the back of, I've got this is my 7th book. I've got 30 years as a cognitive scientist understanding why we see the way we do. You can see my TED Talks on, why we see illusions, brain unified theory of illusions, why we have color vision, why your eyes face forward. It's actually, it's about seeing more in the forest. It's kind of X-ray vision. Color vision is an empath sense. Why we came to have music. How did music culturally evolve to sound like a human evocatively moving in your midst? It's sort of unpacking why things are designed the way they are, why you see the way you do, or why even cultural things evolve to fit us and how all these kinds of things work. So when I started riding a motorcycle 5 years ago, as that kind of person with that kind of background of unpacking the design and culture or the natural world, I started to understand the experience of the ride and how it transforms a rider and the bike into one beast. In very specific neuroscientific senses, you become one with it in both emotionally and your motor capabilities are one with it in ways that don't happen in a car. So for example, I have videos of me just I can move down the street and I can just be turning and whizzing like this. And no part of me is moving. I'm not taking part of my body like this. If I had to move this arm by lifting it, using my other arm to move it, it would mean that this arm is not part of my body. It would be like, handicapped or something. It's numb. It's not part of my body. Anything, turn a knob, everything that in the world that you use your body to move those things aren't you. And in a car, when you rotate the steering wheel, you're moving your body to move that thing. That thing ain't you. On a motorcycle, once you understand countersteering and the way that we actually do it, I just hold absolutely still. There's nothing. I'm in fact providing some slight pressure. And that pressure alone, just like pressure on a muscle inside my body, which pulls on a bone, which makes my leg move or my arm move, that pressure alone makes the whole 600-pound bike lean and stay and turn. I didn't move. I'm absolutely rigid. And this is just one of a half a dozen ways in which you become neuroscientifically one with the motorcycle. And it helps explain why we motorcyclists, it's often life-changing. And it seems like it's kind of a weird thing. It's just a guy on a big bike with an engine. But it really taps into much deeper stuff, both emotionally, because you're actually communicating through the engine of the bike. And emotionally, your emotions are in the engine of the bike in terms of its drivetrain and the RPMs relative to your speed. All of these things, in fact, have the same emotional expressiveness that we have in our normal emotional expressions, as I talk in that book, The Expressly Human, I talked about before. So it's much deeper than motorcyclists ever really understood. So the motorcyclists, when they really go, oh, that's why I love it in this way, or oh, this is why speed does this to me. So it's filled with these sorts of insights that only someone with an expertise such as it is that I have after all these years would write about.
Although the way you describe it, I imagine it would be similar to the experience of flying if you were a bird. You're just making these slight, almost non-movements, and you're still.
Well, moving. The difference is even in a bird, I mean, they're actually modulating their ailerons or whatever the word might, the equivalent of. They're actually modulating those. They'd be small modulations, but the analogy would be like you're on a horse. You don't pull the reins. You just if your hands are on it, just imagine you just slightly push pressure on it, and the horse will know that, oh, he's putting slight pressure there. That means go right. You're not actually moving anything. You're just providing. There's a touch sensitivity that you end up. The physics of a bike at speed gives you what is in effect a nervous system to the bike that comes for free from the physics. Yet there's no, in fact, nervous system there at all.
Really interesting. Well, Mark, we appreciate you being here. Mark Changizi on X, follow him there. Anywhere else people should find you?
I've got YouTube, which they've censored me, and so but I'm at YouTube under the same name and Instagram. And there's the Motorcycle Mind at Instagram, also at Instagram, devoted to the Motorcycle Mind.
And the TED Talks. Thank you for being here, my friend. I hope to talk to you again soon.
All right, it's great to be here.
Cheers. And if I could just shine a little light on what he was saying there about the evolutionary perspective on these things. When you're a biologist, in particular the depth that he is sort of embedded in this material, is the answer to every question is, what is the evolutionary forces that brought this? What is the adaptation what is the issue that it solved? And that's the answer to every question in biology. Not what does this do? How did it get here? It's what did it solve? What were the adaptive pressures on the biological system? And then I'm sure Mark has ways to work the math out. There's actually mathematical ways of showing how we evolve. So this notion of is there evolution is sort of an odd concept if you're a biologist. So coming up, Caleb, do you have guest list for us here? There we are. Susan's going to do Calling Out tomorrow. It's going to be a very interesting show. Is Cindy going to join us? Cindy Kesa? That's what I'm hearing. Oh, she's going to try to grab a mic here.
I hope so.
Okay. Sam Cooper and Alex Michelson, we're going to talk about the craziness in Los Angeles,
He's
amongst
like,
other
okay.
things.
Let's move on.
Because is it Cindy coming tomorrow? Is that the plan?
Yeah, she is.
Okay, well,
I
then
think
it's
if
gonna
we
be-
can get our audio to work and our
Oh,
video.
that's what you're worried about. Okay, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And Sam Cooper and Alex Michelson for me tomorrow. We're going to talk about some research. Jeffrey Tucker swinging by on Thursday, which is awesome. Joe Allen. Professor Sam Vaknin is another physicist turned psychologist, but he was in a much more dynamic, personality-driven analysis. So we're going to talk about that. And we appreciate you all being here today. I'm watching you on the rants. I'm watching you on the restream and your comments have been very interesting and your engagement is appreciated. Thank you
I'm
for
having more than one psychic tomorrow.
Okay.
There's 3.
Oh, wow. Who? Can you say?
Eddie, Eddie Connor. He's our Eddie Connor Soul. And we're also having the fairy lady. Oh, God, what's her name?
And Cindy.
And Cindy, yes.
And Cindy, okay.
I'm sorry, there's another one.
Okay. Well, I suggest
Gray.
it's going to be a lot of. My expectation is there they are.
There she is.
My expectation is there's going to be a lot of people.
Lori, right?
Lori,
That's her
yeah.
name, right?
That's Lori, yeah. A lot of expectation. You see AI, Trump, Israel, Diddy. There's a lot of speculation about what's coming in the world, which is in a time of uncertainty. People really like to hear those things. That's what I told Susan. I said, this is really uncertain times. Mary Todd Lincoln gravitated to all this during the Civil War.
That X post with Tulsi Gabbard talking about the nuclear bomb.
weapons.
Was that old?
It is old.
I feel like that's old.
But there's all kinds of funny business going on there. Too much. We can discuss off the air because there's all kinds of speculation about why she wasn't in the Security Council meeting and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. What do I know?
She's busy.
I appreciate Mark Changizi giving us some insight today because it helped me clarify my thinking. I've been very unsettled with the way things are going. He helped me feel a little better about it. I always appreciate people like Scott Adams that help me clarify why things are the way they are. And Mark has been a part of that for me today. Viva, of course, as always, we appreciate him and his thoughts. Follow him, watch them, watch these guys. Viva Barnes, go see that show. Go see Viva Frei. And we will be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock Pacific time and Susan at 11 Pacific time. We'll see you then. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.